Good afternoon and welcome to MMPC 11 Block 2 Unit 5 Learning and Behavior Modification. Learning. When we say learning, we usually think about what is learned and what we can remember and how we can act on. Learning is much more than what that memorization and information sharing is. Deep and long-lasting learning involves understanding relating to ideas, bringing up more knowledge on it, working on it further, developing it further, connecting it to other related facts, situations, people, and other knowledge. And also, it is independent of critical thinking and the ability to transfer knowledge to new and different contexts. So it is an entire process of assessing what we already know, what is new, to what extent do we try to attempt to understand it, how we can analyze it further, related to other things, related to self, related to the work we are doing, related to the society, how everything is interrelated, and then applying this kind of knowledge gain to make the work easy, effective, productive, and leaving a scope for further development is all what we deal with in learning. But we need to understand learning much better by defining it. One of the best definitions that I have come across is learning is an acquired change in behavior resulting from experience, practice, or training, the modifications that reflect in what one does or the consequences of their actions, and is relatively permanent until further reinforcement or improvement are applicable. Now, in this definition, we see certain words. First of all, learning. Learning may not reflect in performance. Whatever you have learned, it may not show in your actions, in your work, but then this will be indirectly used at sometimes. So learning may not be something which is directly used in performance. It may not be, right? Next, learning is a change in the behavior. The change may be good or bad. It may be evident only when situations arise and when one can apply such to the behavior. We understand someone has learned this. Otherwise, it may not be that a person has learned it. Because when we say learning, we are talking about something which you have gained either through knowledge or experience, and this may be applicable and may not be applicable, but whenever it is applicable, we can see it in people's actions and behavior. Behavior is what learning reflects in the behavior. It may not reflect in a certain action, but it may be visible in the behavior. For example, I may learn to drive, but then I may personally not drive my car. So when I have a driver and driving for me, I will not at least react and put the driver in panic. So in my behavior, what we see is I can understand the situation of a driver, and when he or she drives, I needn't panic, and I can understand how he or she would maneuver the vehicle and take to the destination in a perfect way. So I can show it in my behavior, but I may not show it in my performance. Next, we say that learning is a behavioral modification, and learning can be seen in, it results from certain experience, practice, or training. One may personally learn it, one may learn it and learn something new and practice it, or one may have got some training. So as an individual, if I have learned driving and I bear a driver license as well, I acquired a driver license as well. I have got the license because I have exhibited that skill by showing that I can drive after a certain level of practice while I'm being trained. And I've got that experience. But personally, I'm not choosing to drive my car. So I have learned it. If I had not learned how to drive and how to run a vehicle, how to manage a vehicle during different situations like a crowded place or a narrow path, then I have not learned it. But having learned it, I have understood it. And the learning had happened by experience, by practice and training. Learning is kind of, uh, not permanent in a way that whatever you have learned stays temporary, and this needs to be relearned when required. So we may not call it learning is permanent, but if you are learning something and there is no further change or development in that knowledge and you remember it forever, you recall it, and if required, you may even brush up the knowledge, in which case you are trying to extend the temporary learning, and then that stays for a longer time, and that is how it becomes permanent. But the temporary changes are just reflective, but it is gradually, if on repetition, becomes permanent. Learning is said to be reinforced. Learning is like continuous. Like I said, what we learn will stay with us for some time, so it is temporary. And if I need to retain this learning, I need to brush up, or I need to update, or I need to relearn it, the same thing, so that the learning becomes permanent. So it is something that we are reinforcing, and it is continuous. Wherever there is new concepts, new knowledge involved, the learning process done currently will upgrade or upskill us, and this is how learning continues. What is the significance of learning? Learning is significant for an individual, learning is significant for an organization, and also learning is significant for certain situations. Individuals, how is it significant? Let us see. It enhances one's competency, ability to do things, ability to deal with situation or people. So it enhances one's competency regarding work, regarding interpersonal relations, or regarding how you manage the situation or how you manage yourself in different situations. It enables one to meet the demands of change. Like I just said, like it is in the different situations, how do you manage yourself? How do you carry yourself? It is the capacity to learn that makes a person a lifelong learner. So it is a permanent ability. Learning is beyond formal education. Formal education gives you knowledge. Learning further helps you to apply that knowledge, analyze that knowledge. So learning is beyond the formal education. Learning, the learned are respectable and socially acceptable. When you have new knowledge, or say suppose you meet a group of people and they're all talking about something recent, And if you find yourself not abreast of what they are talking, then possibly you will gradually get omitted or phased out, or people may not include you in the interaction. But if you are yourself knowledgeable, then people start to accommodate you, interact with you, welcome you to participate, and you become socially acceptable. It exposes the gaps of learning. If you learn, then you will also come across what you fall short of knowledge or ability, and these gaps can be filled. So learning helps us understand what else to learn, and in organizations, employee learning is directly proportional to the organizational effect. The more an employee learns, the better they can uh, work or perform. Organizations become innovative, open to change, and resilient if the employees are in the process of learning. They participate in the process of learning, because one idea leads to the other, and one situation comes up with certain problems. And when you interact in an organization along with others, each one being different and coming up with different piece of information and knowledge, we learn together, and thus enhances everybody's competence or skill and the organization skill. For organizations, it can set more realistic goals and achieve them too. Learning can help the organization and its members to uh, learn, improve. Like for individual, we find the learning gaps. So does it work for the organization, where the organization would wish to stay ahead of the competition, and they would always try to uh, improvise on their goals. Organizations can achieve a balance between long-term effectiveness and short-term efficiency by continuous learning. For society, it is significant because a learned society is more cohesive. People understand each other. People coordinate and collaborate with each other, because they know that everybody has got a piece of information, and then they turn into a knowledge society. Learned society is stronger, because learned society is abreast of the skill and development. Uh, the society knows how to deal with the latest situations, and that is how it becomes stronger, and it can face the bigger challenges that come. Let us look at some learning theories. Theories basically are divided into two sets: learning behavioral theories and the cognitive theories. Further, the behavioral theories constitute the classical conditioning, the operant conditioning, the behavioral modification, and the social learning. Now, cognitive theories that are, which are, have a contemporary perspective about learning. And learning is a cognitive process by itself. Cognitive processes assume that people are conscious and are active learners. The organism, here we say, the organism or the individual learns the meaning of the objects, the events, the situation, and responds accordingly to to any of these based on the meaning they assign to the stimuli. Now, prior learning or the experience of an individual um, now enables a person to act in a certain way or exhibit certain behavior, or they may have certain options to choose from based on their previous experience. And such behavioral choices, whichever they pick, now they then understand, like for each of the choice they prefer, there would be some consequence. And this is what we say the perceived consequence. Now, the perceived consequence will be achieved if they are going to exhibit a certain behavior. And this consequence, if it turns out to be positive, then the individual or the organism understands that this kind of an action leads to this consequence, and so they repeat if the consequence is positive. And if the consequence is negative, they bring in changes and they go for alternative choices the next time they come across such a situation. Every time they understand the consequence or the result or the outcome, whether it is positive or negative, accordingly their they feed this back into their prior learning, or they their experience gets replenished, and their experience gets corrected. So in future, when they come across such situation, they know like what kind of corrections they need to make. When it comes to the behavioral theories, let us deal with each one of them and understand what happens in each of them. Classical conditioning. Learning through association is one of the most fundamental ways that people learn new things. A Russian psychologist, Van Pavlov, discovered one method of learning during his experiments on the digestive system of dogs. He noted that the dogs would naturally salivate at the sight of food, but that eventually the dogs also began to salivate whenever they spotted the experimenter's white lab coat. Now they felt if the white lab coat, which is not actually a food, if a similar stimulant is exhibited, they wanted to check if the dog would salivate. So that is when, before conditioning, before making the dog learn anything, so they brought a neutral stimulus, and that is the bell. And when they rang the bell, there was no such salivation, which is there is no response, conditioned response. And then they came up with the food. So before giving any kind of a learning to the dog or conditioning it, they brought food, which is a conditioned stimulus. The dog understands that this is food and starts salivating. So this is an unconditioned response. So with a neutral stimulus, they observed in conditioned, they observed that there is no such conditioned response. And with a unconditioned stimulus, that is meat, the dog salivated, which is a conditioned response. Now they started conditioning. So while conditioning, they served the food, and along with it, they rang the bell. This continued for quite some repetitions when the dog understood that food and the bell have some kind of an association. So the dog got conditioned that the ringing of bell and the food offer will be taking place at the same time. So the dog started salivating. After the conditioning, every time they rang the bell, the dog, having associated the ringing of bell to the serving of food, started salivating. Now this is the conditioned stimulus, that is ringing of bell, which was early a neutral stimulus. Now after conditioning has become a conditioned stimulus, resulting in a conditioned response, that is salivating. Where food is not provided, the unconditioned stimulus is absent, yet the dog started salivating. So an unconditioned stimulus that naturally and automatically triggers a response is paired with the neutral stimulus. Eventually an association forms, and the previously neutral stimulus becomes known as conditioned stimulus, that then triggers a conditioned response. Now this is classical conditioning. We do see such in organizations. Now when in an organization, in a work floor, when um, when the superior comes on a particular time, the workers uh, be at their best alert situation, and they focus on their work. Now, every time they hear the arrival of the boss or superior, they start focusing much better than they usually work. This kind of things happen. Next, let us see the operant or instrumental conditioning. Now, according to this theory, the behavior that we observe in a person or an individual is a function of its consequences. Now, the worker understands that if I perform a certain act or if I behave in a certain manner, I get benefited or I get rewarded or I get an appreciation. So they behave in a certain fashion. So behavior is the function of its consequences. Whenever they want a such positive consequence, they would behave in a certain way. So it is something which is voluntary. They needn't be conditioned. So they kind of self-motivated and they want to repeat this behavior every time they want that kind of a consequence. So the learner operates on the environment to modify himself or herself, fitting according to the environment situation, wherein he would frame his desired outcomes. Let us compare the classical conditioning with the operant conditioning. The learner here, we can consider the worker here, uh, in the classical conditioning acts in a reactive fashion because they need to be conditioned, and that's a elicited response. Whereas in the operant conditioning, the 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 learner is basically self-interested, and this is a response that is emitted by his own behavior, and this is proactive because the learner believes that this is the behavior which will result into a certain fixed consequence. Now, there is reinforcement, which is the reinforcement not received by choice. There's a fixed reinforcement in case of classical conditioning, whereas in operant conditioning, there occurs, it occurs after the response. The response is basically followed by a reinforcing stimulus or event. So they know, like, if I do this or if I behave in this manner, I'm going to be rewarded or appreciated, and they that would reinforce every time they do this, repeat this behavior, they get rewarded. The nature of responses in case of classical conditioning were involuntary because it works on the stimulus. It responds to the stimulus. The person responds to the stimulus, and that is reflexive. Whereas in case of operant conditioning, it is spontaneous, and the respondent himself or herself, voluntarily does that kind of show that behavior or exhibit that behavior. The nature of learning in case of classical conditioning is neutral stimulus that becomes a conditioned stimulus, whereas in this there's a probability of making a response is altered by the consequences that follow. The worker knows, like, how should I behave or how much should I exhibit the positive behavior in order to get the desired results or rewards. The third learning theory is the social learning, also referred as observational or vicarious learning, where the worker decides on a model, someone who they appreciate, someone who they want to imitate, So they observe the model continuously, and notice how the model behaves, how the model receives things, how the model responds to situations, and all these actions, all these ways of the model's behavior and performance are noted down after observing well. They are kind of practiced, you can say, like they pay attention to each of these models' behavior, and they try to remember how the model proceeded, every step, like how they have been doing. And when they understand this entire process, they want to repeat it themselves. They practice the same model behavior, or they imitate this behavior. And when they imitate such a behavior, there is a choice again, whether they would do all of what the model does, or they may make some tweaks here and there. They may retain certain favorable aspects of the model's behavior, and they may incorporate few of their own to make it better as well. And this comes basically with an intrinsic behavior or a motivated self, and they imitate the model's behavior. Then we see this fourth theory, that is the behavioral modification. In behavioral modification, what we come across is the reinforcement principle. Now, the reinforcement principle says that a behavior with a positive outcome has a tendency to repeat itself, and the one with a negative consequence does not repeat itself. Now, is reinforcement similar as motivation? Because when the reinforcement acts as a stimulus, then they do a certain act, or they behave in a certain way. Motivation is fundamentally a psychological process, and has a broader connotation than the reinforcement. Motivation, we can say, is intrinsic process, but reinforcement is related to the environment. Um, it can be any action, like an appreciation, or say a small reward, or a small token of a small token of recognition, or maybe a citation. Something very small can also impact it. Now, reinforcement enhances the strength of the response and prompts repetitions of the behavior. Now, when we say this reinforcement, what happens actually? Uh, the behavior is preceded by an environmental event or stimulus, and is also followed by an environmental event that is a consequence. Now, whatever is leading to such behavior can be an antecedent. The antecedent may be something like a boss's encouragement, a superior's help, in the sense like the superior might have chalked down how the individual needs to perform. They may have given some guidelines. So those instructions might themselves be an antecedent to a certain behavior. And then this leads to the consequence. The consequence can be positive or negative. Say, suppose, let us take this way. The beginning of the day, it's a new employee, and the new employee, the superior, suggests a plan of action for the day, a certain list to do for the day. And the list is what we call an antecedent. This helps the individual to organize his or her day, and he would behave in the pattern shown by the superior or mentor. A consequence will be the outcome, and when they get the positive results, the boss will appreciate, And every time this happens, the positive consequences, the person will repeat that behavior. So even in case the boss in one of the days to come doesn't provide a list of things to do the day, the individual may himself or herself prepare one, right? So they understand that chalking out what to do for the day helps them complete the assignments the way it is planned. So this is a very simple way of reinforcement. So that plan for the day itself acts like a reinforcement, and they would keep repeating it. Reinforcement, punishment, and extinction play a role in key play a key role in the learning of an individual. Reinforcement usually helps the individual. Punishment we can interpret as now it is used to stop a certain behavior. Now, um, we can see certain reinforcers. Now the reinforcement basically is an attempt to develop, to strengthen desirable behavior. um, Punishment and extinction will help in minimizing certain undesirable behavior, right? So positive reinforcement strengthens the desired behavior. So when we see the reinforcers, we come across positive reinforcers and negative reinforcers. Now, positive reinforcers are they strengthen the desired behavior, and in positive reinforcers, we come across again two types. One are something is primary reinforcers, and then the secondary reinforcers. The food, clothing, and shelter is basically the primary reinforcer. They satisfy the biological needs. The secondary reinforcers are like money, status, or respect they get, or maybe job title, or an appreciation, an award. All these are secondary reinforcers, also called as conditioned reinforcers. Now, positive reinforcement principles help a manager to keep using it, and then there are certain principles on basis of which the positive reinforcement should be done. Um, the principle of contingent reinforcement, that is, the reinforcer must be admitted only if the desired behavior has occurred, and the moment it occurs, it needs to be recognized. Then the principle of immediate reinforcement, that is, if the reinforcement is done immediately, then the effectiveness would increase. In the principle of reinforcement size, the larger the amount of reinforcement given to the individual, the more frequent, the more repeatedly they would bring up that behavior. So the frequency of performing better or showing a positive consequence will be increasing. And then the principle of reinforcement deprivation. At times, we need to check, the managers can check like what is the person deprived of. The more a person is deprived of, the better will be the interest in the person to pursue for attaining that reinforcement. So, deprivation of the reinforcer leads to a greater effect on the future occurrence of the desired behavior. And then we see the negative reinforcers. The negative reinforcement, which is an unpleasant event that precedes, uh, excuse me, any unpleasant event that precedes a behavior is removed, and the removal of that behavior can help the person perform better. Like the workplace may be very, very humid or hot. So if that is removed, that negative reinforcer is removed, then the workers may feel more comfortable and serve better and perform better, and their productivity also increases. So negative reinforcers can also be used. Now, how do we use the reinforcers? Now, the schedule of reinforcement helps a manager understand how it should be done. Now, reinforcement is something which shouldn't be done in a, I mean, very frequently, um, all the cases. So it has to be like done intermittently. Now, when we are saying intermittent, again, we need to see like how often can it be repeated. So uh, we can we can consider this on fixed interval. Now that is based on the timings. Now the reinforcers are administered after a constant duration of time lapse. Uh, we can say like the monthly salary what people get is the reinforcer. So they work for it. Now, uh, what happens is, say suppose we are talking about the monthly salary. Now a person works in the entire month. So towards the end of the month, they would be performing better. And because they are going to get this. While this is a fixed interval reinforcement, the employee may not perform equally on all days. So the reinforcement is usually calculated on an average basis, and that is the reason why a certain salary is fixed and that is given once the month. Now, the such reinforcement may bring like a fast, what do you say, extinction, you can say like, now next is the variable interval. Now in variable interval, the reinforcers administered after a variable amount of time has lapsed, like the incentives that are given that come after a certain time. The boss passes by employee desk at different times of different days. Now, this is one such example. Like uh, if a, if the workers uh, have got, see, people are different, and they do not perform with consistency. If a boss passes by the workplace, at that moment, every worker tries to perform best. Now, if a boss comes on the same at the same time every day, the workers know the time, and at that time they would be working well, or they would be giving their best performance in a focused manner. So if we change it to variable interval, the boss would be coming at different times in the day. Again, there is a problem like they would be active for a longer period, unlike they would be active only for a specific period when the boss comes. Say suppose the boss comes every day at 12 o'clock, so they are doing their best at that moment. When the time is put variable, like they come once he comes at 4 o'clock, someday he comes at 12 o'clock, someday he comes at 1 or 9 o'clock. So in such case, the employees are more alert and they would be working throughout the day. Here again, what happens is the on a single day after the boss visit, the employees may feel a little lenient, and they would be they might not follow the rules and procedures with the same consistency. So when the boss leaves, they feel he wouldn't come back for the day, and they may manipulate their performances. So Here we see the effect is slow, and then the extinction happens in such behavior. After some time, they do not perform the same way. Fixed ratio schedules like the reinforcer administers after a constant number of actions performed. This we can consider the sales agents example. If we take the incentives they get or the bonuses they get after a certain target achievement. Now, until the target is achieved, they'll be working. And once they get their reinforcement, after that, they may not have the same energy levels until the next target comes. I mean, say suppose they are given a target of 1 lakh. So up to that 1 lakh, they put their best effort. When they get that reward or bonus, and after that, their efforts may not be up to the mark, and they get a little slow in their performance until the next target level comes, like that is say 2 lakhs or 2.5 lakhs. So when they get nearer to that target, then they may muster up that energy and they will again perform better. So there is there we can here we can see uh, some infrequent performance levels, and we can see that there is moderately fast extinction in this, like the behavior is quite. Now, the variable ratio schedule, here the reinforces administered after a variable number of actions performed. Here there is no fixed performance targets. It will be variable. Say suppose the first reinforcement will be done when the sales achieved is say 2 lakhs, but after that it is not the next 2 lakhs, but it is say suppose 8 lakhs, and after that it can be from 8, then it can move to say 12 lakhs only. So the first to the second there is a gap of 6 difference of 6 lakhs, but the second and the third targets there is a gap of only 4 lakhs. So that might be easy. Now there is in such case they are not sure when the reinforcement would stop. So in which case the extinction will be very slow. Now, reinforcement and punishment. Now, how would they be dealt with by the managers? Now, if we look at a continuum where the undesirable behavior is affected, is punished, and the desirable behavior is reinforced, and these reinforcers can be negative or positive. So if we say this, let us take the punishment. Uh, Negative reinforces and the punishment, undesirable behavior. These are two things that happen. Now, uh, when the negative reinforce is applied, uh, then and they are punished, the individual will immediately show the change in behavior, right? And at the same time we can see like the desirable behavior. If the negative reinforcements are withheld, then the desirable behavior will be reinforced. um, so similarly, like it changes with the punishment. So the problem in when we have to solve problems, we go with this two situations. Now, the negative impact of punishment. Say, suppose an undesirable behavior is noticed, and that is immediately punished by the boss or the supervisor. Now, there will be some kind of a change, but then this may be a temporary change, and the person may repeat the same behavior again. So if the person repeats the same behavior, and the superior will punish them again. But if we do such repeated punishments, then this may also bring in a much critical situation, and the punishments, if repeated, may lead to certain consequences which will not be favorable for the organization. Um, People may tend to do the same mistake again and again, or they every time they are punished, they may become a little aggressive, or they may not participate well in the team work, they may not perform better, or they may not be making any contribution, they may even turn hostile to the superior and apathic to the superior, and possibly when a harder situation or a challenging task comes, they may even keep themselves away from the work or duty. So absenteeism may increase if excessive punishment is used. So managers need to check like how much punishment given, and if possible, usually punishment is to be avoided. Rather, some negative reinforcement can be used in its place. Learning organizations. The best definition about a learning organization that I've come across is by David Garvin, who says an organization skilled at creating, acquiring, and transferring knowledge, and at modifying its behavior to reflect new knowledge and insights. Here, a learning organization. Now, it is talking about the organization acquiring the skills. The organization keeps learning, keeps acquiring, so it is continuously growing. So an organization that learns has skills, and a skilled organization tries to transfer that knowledge to its members or employees, and these employees in turn perform better, and they come up with ways to improvise and bring in more knowledge. So a learning organization always attempts to improve their employees and their employee behavior through learning. Now, a learning organization is usually is an active philosophy, that, not merely an organizational system, because it goes by a scientific method of improving itself. The learning organization believes that it is only competitive advantage um, if they have that learning. So they keep themselves ahead of competition. They keep themselves, I mean, in a challenging track, and every time they keep improving. Encourages people to learn to produce the results they desire, and the learning organization nurtures the creative and innovative patterns of collective learning. They encourage people to come together, and because they understand individuals are different and individuals' perceptions are different, and the learning spirit changes and is different from person to person, and each one can contribute together when they learn together, and they can bring about a very productive interaction. The learning organization also always develops fresh organizational capabilities all the time, because of the continuous improvement that goes on in the organization. Learning organizations are basically skilled at a systematic problem solving, because they rely on the scientific method, and they are not going by any guesswork, so to say, or for diagnosing the problems. Now, They insist on data rather than assumptions as a background for making the decisions. Now, they depend on simple statistical tools to organize the data, analyze it, infer from that analysis, and then take an action. So, a learning organization always is a systematic problem solver. The learning organization works on experimentation basis. Like there is a systematic search for testing of new knowledge. They find out for that continuous improvement. The new methods and new technologies are being used so that the learning organization keeps on learning. Experimentation to ensure steady flow of new ideas to keep pursuing the ongoing programs or say development. The demonstration of organizational capabilities by introducing self-managing teams and high level of worker autonomy. Then the learning from the past experience, the organization reviews and assesses their success or failure systematically. Whatever, wherever they require changes, they incorporate the changes. Wherever there is progressive learning, they record it. They can then repeat it, and these recorded lessons will be uh, passed on to the next level of workers who come. And all that the organization brings up, the new knowledge that they churn out, the new knowledge that they create has to be open to every member of the organization, and they can access it anytime they want and learn it. Organizations are scaled at learning from others. Now, uh, individuals are different, so does organizations. Now, a learning organization should encourage people to learn from its environment, both internal and external, because people are different and each one can come up with something more creative. The learning organizations also should be open to industries or businesses which are in other arenas, other streams, or say they are from a different industry as such, because uh, people, when they come from different spheres, they bring more fertile thought processes, and they can incorporate their knowledge, and the cross functional knowledge can help each other and to bring up very innovative or out of the box thinking. So the learning organization is always open for others, to others, and they can interact with others in order to bring up better and new learning. Learning organization always looks up to the best practices, so that which are proven, and then they can train their own people to perform in the same manner and improve their productivity. Um, they can even study the current practices, the way they are doing. Um, Everything they are currently practicing can be studied further in order to bring in improvements. So, a learning organization continuously uh, improves. The learning organizations have to be open for transferring the knowledge. That means sharing the knowledge. They must spread the knowledge quickly and efficiently throughout the organization without any discrimination. Anyone interested to gain the knowledge or learn the processes must be allowed to access them. They must use various mechanisms to make the knowledge available. Earlier, it was very difficult. There was only like the pen and paper or black and white, we say, means of transferring the knowledge. But these days, with an advent of the computers and the internet, it is possible to make this knowledge to reach every corner and every hand that extends to receive the knowledge. Uh, People can access the library of the organization. They should be able to access. They should be able to visit the different departments, understand the processes, understand the procedures the others follow, understand the technology other departments follow, so that they understand their own organization thoroughly. In certain situations, even the organization gives the employees a cross-departmental interaction so that people understand the works better. Behavior modification. Organizations, since they are ever learning, they have that ever learning spirit, they are they have to be open for the behavior modification. As human behavior is mainly learned, there is a possibility of modifying it, improving it. Behavior can be changed based on the changes in the environment, like we have seen the different cognitive models and the response to stimuli models, and wherein we understand an individual intending to change should be alert and open to the stimulus that appears and respond accordingly. The principles of social learning can be effectively used to change or modify behavior. Like we have seen the way an individual who wants to change his or her behavior, looking up to a role model, by observing them and learning from them, practicing what they do, can improve it. So, behavior modification happens through interaction. Behavior modification acts as an indicator of effectiveness of counseling or success of the modification process. The changed behavior shows that the individual has transformed. The counseling techniques need to be based on the individual needs, whose behavior is to be modified. They can customize according to the learner and create a situation wherein the kind of reinforcements they plan, which will enable the employee to learn better. Behavioral modification process. The individual whose behavior needs to be changed, they need to be set a goal like the target behavior. Then they need to assess the currently, like what is the frequency this undesirable behavior occurs, and to what length does that undesirable behavior stays with the person, and to what extent does it impact on the person and the others who are involved. Once they understand this, they can select a certain intervention. It can be training, it can be modeling, it can be um, it can be a classroom way of giving inputs. And then once it is done, the change behavior needs to be measured, evaluated, and any further input required can be given. So the follow-up needs to be taken. That's for the day. Thank you.